Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today for our 30 on Thursday webinar, using the new Office 365 Analytics to track user patterns. Just a little bit about Protiviti before we get started. We are a global consulting firm providing solutions to business problems in technology, business process, analytics, risk, transactions, and internal audit. Our full-service enterprise content management team has helped hundreds of clients realize the value of SharePoint and Office 365. Our 30 on Thursday webinar series is a bi-weekly 30-minute webinar series where we talk all things SharePoint, Office 365, and Enterprise Content Management. Our next webinar will be next Thursday, April 6th, where we will be talking all about Office 365 Power Apps. If you are interested in registering for that webinar and seeing our full event schedule, you can go to our website, ecm.protiviti.com/events. Our Protiviti On Demand team provides on-demand support for Office 365 and SharePoint. Our team can perform system health checks, customizations, Nintex support, user experience, business intelligence, and so much more. If you're interested in a free 1-hour introductory consultation with one of our on-demand team members, you can schedule today by emailing us at ecm@protiviti.com. Today's session is being recorded. You can access the recording of today's session and see all of our past webinar recordings on our YouTube channel. For questions during the presentation today, please use the question window in the GoToMeeting toolbar, or you can live tweet us your questions using the hashtag 30TAnalytics. We will be saving all the questions after Greg's presentation today. Today's presenter is Greg George, Experience Architect here at Protiviti, and I am Julia Marple, and I will be moderating today's session. All right, Greg, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, give me a second. Let me see. Let me know if you can see it.
Okay, hold on one second. All right, looks good.
All right. So today's talk, I'm going to be discussing Office 365 and the reporting tools that are available in the admin area of the site. And we're going to go over what's available, what's the data that's collecting, how can we use it, and what's it good for, as well as what the limitations are to reporting and what can we do about the limitations. So before we begin, this comes from Enor. They're another organization out there, and they've done a lot of work on analytics. And I like this chart because it sort of shows the maturation process of your analytics in your organization. Where are you today? Where would you like to be? And if you notice at the top, there's a big $sign, because even if we're talking about intranets and not websites, there is a dollar value to this. If you can use your analytics to make your intranet or your SharePoint instance more productive, easy to use, people don't waste their time finding content or not finding content, you can see there's a real ROI, or there's a dollar value that you can associate with improving the way your users access the content in your portal. And so down at the bottom is we've got no governance, we've got no training, we've got no tracking. And obviously we don't want to be there. There's plenty of analytics tools out there. We should be monitoring what's going on. And then as we build up the pyramid, develop a strategy, implement the strategy, creating some sort of analytics that you're able to capture. How are you going to report on those? Who's going to receive those reports? And then who's going to be really doing the deep dive in the analysis? In other words, sure, we get a report. It's got some analytics on it, but what does it mean, right? So that's the analysis phase. And then once when you delve into it, you start creating KPIs and making actionable items out of that analysis, saying, well, we're seeing these patterns. How can we change those patterns or improve those patterns? And that's where you're reaching optimization. So overall, the analytics strategy should be to find some tools that'll give you some reporting, some concrete data, and work your way into creating goals and KPIs that you can report on and distribute to the right people, usually the business owners of the content, and optimize that site so people are finding the content that they need. If we look at Office 365 Analytics, the big question here is what's available in the Reporting Center for Office 365. And I'm going to go through a couple slides here, just giving you a brief overview of what's available. And then I'll actually go into a sample site and walk you through some of the reports, and you can see them as they're actually live and with real data. Unfortunately, my site doesn't have a lot of data in it. It's just a demo site, so there's not a lot of activity, but I think it'll give you a sort of a really good viewpoint on what type of content you'll be able to get from these analytics and what you can download and maybe work on your own through Excel or something like that. So basically it starts with a dashboard, and you have to have specific rights to reach this dashboard. So this analytics tool isn't for everybody in the site. There is site analytics that go per site that the site owners can track, but in the admin center, these reports are permission trimmed, and so you will have to grant access to people who can see these reports. And the overall dashboard, you'll notice, gives you information about all your different tools in Office 365. So when we're talking about the activity report and the usage reports, we're not just talking about SharePoint, we're talking about all of the tools that you're using in Office 365. It does give you some usage data on each of those tools. In this shot here, you can see there's a lot of different activity reports. Each one's broken down by the tool itself. Some tools have a lot of reports, others have 1 or 2 reports. And we'll delve into them once when I get into the actual experience. The overall activity reports, you'll see, you can view them by user and by service. And like I said, this is a demo site that I clipped this from. So there's not a lot of activity going on in there, but you can sort of see the type of information you can get from the data. The graph at the bottom that shows the users, you'll actually see which tools are being used and how often, and comparing them, so you'll understand your total ecosystem and how your users are leveraging Office 365 daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly. And then on the comparison of the services, you can see which ones are really getting heavy hit and which ones are really in disuse. Most organizations won't find OneDrive being the least used, but here you can sort of see, okay, there's a lot of inactivity going on in OneDrive, but Exchange is pretty high. There's specific, that activity that I showed you here is for all the different services. The menu I showed you before, you can drill down to specific tools. So on the SharePoint side of things, the specific tools you'll get, one of them is your user data, your user activity specific to SharePoint. And here it's broken down where you can see the users by user, who's viewing, who's syncing, who's sharing internally, who's even sharing externally. So you're getting some good data there about how people are using their documents in the site, not just the number of views or edits on a particular document, but also these other features of the document that SharePoint makes available. The other one is you can look at the graph specifically to files instead of users. So you can look at particular users and how they're running through the system, or the files themselves and how they're being used. Are they being synced? Are they being shared? And they also, in SharePoint, the other side of the thing, of the view of the data, is from the site perspective. So those charts I showed you before, you're looking at the user and what are your users doing with the content in SharePoint. Here it's the sites themselves and how are the sites being used. And so this one might give you some good views on activity of sites. You can see the total number of sites and how many of those sites are actually active. So obviously in this scenario I have, almost 50 sites in my demo area, but 1 or 2 of them are active. That's a bad sign. So this would help administrators sort of monitor sites and look for site owners of inactive sites for maybe it's been active for 180 days or 90 days. It might be time to put some workflow going and say, is this site necessary? Should I remove it, archive it, delete it? Not only can you look at sites specifically, but you can then look at the files within the site. So you can sort of gauge how much content am I saving in all of my sites in SharePoint, and then how much content's being saved in those active sites. So in other words, how much of that content maybe can we archive? And then the last one is the overall storage. So as you're marking up and you're seeing what your storage limits are, this gives you a good view of how much content and how fast is it increasing for any given period of time. The sites can also be broken down by groups and team sites. We know group sites are different than team sites, and so that could give you some different reporting, especially when it comes to activity and how the documents are being used and synced. So before we get into Google Analytics, I want to take you to our demo site and kind of show you these reports in action. Just give me a second to drag it over. Okay, so when you come into the Admin Center, you'll see you've got a dashboard with different information about your Office 365 environment. One of the default charts is your active users. And again, this is active users across all of the different tools in Office 365. If you want to get into the reporting, it's simple as finding your reporting area, and there it's broken up into security and compliance and usage. I didn't really capture any in the slides any information about the security and compliance. I can go there now. It's basically mostly logs and auditing, and particularly specific to email. And so this would be a good tool for your admins to sort of monitor your email and see what's going on with your users and how, do we have issues with malware? Do we have issues with spam? Our rules, are they set up properly? So that's more on the email side of things. But in the usage, we get reports for all tools. So here we can see that activities report. So you can see SharePoint for this demo is kind of the one that's sticking out as the most used tool because I'm in there demoing SharePoint stuff. And then OneDrive, you can see it spiked at one time in there. You'll notice that it just comes out. You can do a week view, a 30-day view, all the way up to 180 days. So it kind of just chunks it out in different areas and gives you a different perspective on what's going on in your environment overall, the activity of all users. Down below, you'll see these cards are broken out by tool and gives you information on what's going on, what we think is the most important information in the system. So I can click here to get to the specific SharePoint reports, but if you remember in the slides, you can also get to any report at any time by going in this area here. So if we want to look at Exchange or OneDrive, we can jump there. For now, I'm going to show you sort of the specific things about active users for the entire environment first, and then we'll jump into SharePoint. If we look at our active users as it loads, well, we can see the activity for the different environments. I'm going to jump down to 30 days so it doesn't take as long to load the data. And any one of these charts you can export. Not sure why when we're not getting a report underneath yet. Let me jump to another report. If we go down to our SharePoint activities, we can see, again, this is based on files being used. And what I didn't show you in the charts is these are the graphs that are pulling data from the actual data that it pulls in the report. So what you've got here is a view based on files or a view based on users, but the raw data is below. And here you've got everything that it's pulling, and you can see you can export that into a spreadsheet and start slicing and dicing if you want to. Unfortunately, you really can't do it within the tool itself, but if you have access to Power BI or something, you can then leverage that to sort of visualize more in what's more in the data that's in this spreadsheet. But here you can see you can look by particular users. Again, this is the user activity report, and we've got where they're last active, how many views they have, and what they're doing with it, syncing it, sharing it. You can sort it, and you can see your top users. Obviously, I don't have a lot of content in this demo site, but you can see who your big users are, who's been very active, if you want to do that. If you're a company that really doesn't want to share particular user information, there is settings that you can set up within the Admin Center where you can hide user content. And again, if you just go into the services and add-in area, you'll see that there is a section for reports. And in the reports area, oh, okay. I should have access to it. In the reports area is where you can configure that to either hide the users or show the users. By default, the users will be shown in the area. Again, that was in the services and add-in space. Let me jump back to the reports. So we were looking at SharePoint activity and slicing and dicing of this content here. If we go to the site information, again, you'll see the chart that I showed you in the PowerPoint presentation, but also the raw data that's creating those charts. And here, the nice thing that comes up right away is you've got your sites and the site owners identified. So if you are checking on activity and you want to kind of do a status check and see, do I need to notify any owners to say, look, this site's not really being used. Do you still want to own it? Do we still need it? Or can I archive it or set it to inactive? And so as you sort these things, you might hit these low hitters here where, you know, zero activity going on in the span of 1 month. Okay, that might be okay. But if you do 180 days and you've got some sites that have zero activity, it's time to notify the site owners. So you can get some good data there. And again, this one with the sites is groups and teams, but you might have different rules for group sites as opposed to team sites because the nature of the sites are different, and what people are doing in there and how they're collaborating is different. So you can slice it by group sites and run those reports and have a different sort of business rule on who to notify through inactivity. And you can do team sites as well. It's just taking a while to load. So if we look at that reporting, this is out of the box SharePoint. They've made some strides in providing analytics to the admins, sort of surfacing that content. You can even see that content surfaced in site specifics. So if I'm a site owner or I have access to a site, I can see the analytics there. But if we're looking at what type of data it's producing, it's mostly activity, volume, storage numbers, that type of information. And if we remember the pyramid I showed at the beginning of this conversation, you know, how are we going to make some reporting actionable, right? And then how is that going to make it optimized? Well, this stuff can optimize our SharePoint environment by getting away all the clutter and the stuff that's in disuse that's sort of bogging down the system and preventing users from knowing where to go because there's too many sites out there that are inactive and have outdated content. So that's a good actionable item that you can get from these reports. But a lot of analytics that you want to see are how people are clicking through your site, or what are they searching for, or how are they finding content or not finding content. And unfortunately, with the analytics that's provided in Office 365, it's not really tailored towards that sort of user experience type of analytics. This is more of a SharePoint admin or Office 365 admin viewpoint on things, how to keep it clean in that regard, not how to keep it streamlined for the user access and content. So unfortunately, I think we've made big strides. It's an easy interface to use. You've seen me bopping around, changing reports and looking at different graphs. And this is big strides compared to what we had out of the box in 2013. But again, I think it's sort of not quite there yet in regards to the types of data that it's presenting. I think it can graphically present that data and let you slice it and dice it, but it's not capturing the right data yet. So at this point, I would still recommend using this for that particular type of information in the analytics, but I think you're also going to have to use another tool to capture that other analytics that would be of interest to you. And so to sort of finish up on this conversation, I know I only have 5 minutes, so I'm going to run through this quickly. Some organizations they've spent the money on Office 365. There's no money in the budget for a Web Trends or a Cardiolog, which are great tools that have, you know, out-of-the-box SharePoint-specific reporting that you can run, but they're very expensive. So one way to sort of capture that other perspective on analytics would be using Google Analytics. It's a free tool. It allows you to track other items, other analytics in your system that the out-of-the-box Office 365 reporting doesn't really do. So just to highlight some things here, I just quickly show you what Google is collecting on each page hit. If you add the Google Analytics code to your master page, it's going to be on every page, and you'll be able to track usage. And it's going to collect all this information every time somebody clicks on a page, as long as they have Java turned on, which most people do nowadays. And with that information, there's a lot of slicing and dicing that you can do to sort of track people's usage. And so one of the key ones that's very easy to do is site search. Yes, in Google Analytics, you can look at the search terms and get a report on that. But in Google Analytics, you can do a little bit more than just the terms and getting a rundown of what the most popular terms were. If you set it up quickly, typically in SharePoint, your query parameter is going to be a K, and all you have to do is go into your properties and edit and allow the Google to track your search by providing what the query parameter is. And you can have multiple ones in there. And by adding that in, it's going to start tracking your site search. And with that, when you track search, you'll get a list of all the top searches. But one of the things that you can do to track to see how well search is actually functioning is you can create a report in Google Analytics that does the % of search exits. And what that means is if I type in a keyword and I get a results page and I don't click on any item in the results set but leave, that's an exit from a search results page, which means I typed in a term, I didn't see a result that intrigued me enough to think it was going to answer my question, and so I just left, I gave up. And what you can track is sort of set KPIs on that and say, well, we want to pay attention to those top 10, top 20 search terms. We want to give some best bets on those terms, or we want to improve the metadata around those content that relates to those terms to make sure that SharePoint's surfacing better results when somebody types in that search term. And if we do that, if we spend a little extra time on that, the top 10 or top 20 terms, we should see that % of search exits go down. And we can set a goal for that. We can say in 3 months, we want to see the % search exits go down by 30%. And if that works, what it's really saying is a user searched in your site, looked at the result set, and clicked on something, found something that they think would answer their question. And that's a successful search. And so with Google Analytics, not only is it tracking those terms, but it's giving you a measurable goal that you can track and set for your organization to improve your search. Another thing, I just mentioned goals. Google Analytics offers an idea where you can track goals. You can set specific sort of click paths and track those and see if users follow the path you want them to get to the information they need. And goals are really easy to set up and track, and once when they're set up, they're easy to distribute reports to users to know how well their content is working. So if we think of a goal, one of the ways we're going to track it is set a number. And it's arbitrary number in essence, but what you're doing is you're going to track to see success. So whatever value you give it, it should relate to other goals that you have in order of importance, but ultimately it's arbitrary. It's a number that we can gauge and see how well we're tracking towards it. And typically it's the goal value and the page views over the total views. And that gives you your calculated value. And you want to trend it up and sort of have a KPI set where you want that to be based on the information you're getting and how you're improving that click path. When you set up a goal, we can think of it as the simplest way would be a form, or maybe for communications in an intranet, if you have news on the home page and you want to track people that go to the teaser on the home page to the actual news article and read it, that could be, you could set a goal for that. So there's a click path from the home page to the news article page that you're going to track, and you're going to set a number value to it and try to reach that goal. And what Google can do when you set that path up and tag that link is it'll give you a funnel to success. So if it was a multi-step process in your goals that you set up, you could track it in the funnel, and Google will give you an out-of-the-box report that shows you this many people started the process. In the middle of the process, this many people left, and this many people continued, and then the final step is success, and it gives you a number. So what you see in this particular example is out of the 10,000 people that started the process, 1,200 of them left without even clicking the right thing. But as you funnel through it, the ones that did click it, it gets smaller in percentage, right? But you're working towards success factor. And what you don't want to see in some reports is maybe that sign-in page, instead of 3,000, it shows 8,000. We've got an issue there, we need to fix it, and then track it and set a goal to see if it improved. And if not, go back, rework it, and that's that iterative process. So once when you set goals, you get some really nice reports. There's even a report I didn't have an example of that shows you the reverse funnel. And sometimes showing you from success to beginning gives you interesting data points on where they left. So you can look at it both ways to sort of glean information about what's going on there and what's wrong, or what's right. Once when you set up those goals, you have that view of the funnel itself, but just on your dashboard of your goals, you'll see where your success or conversion rate is. And it's an arbitrary number, right? But what you want to do is see trends. In analytics, it's always about the trends. So if your success in all sessions is 8%, maybe you want to work on it some, improve that flow so that what you see in this report is a 12% or a 15% success rate. And then you can equate that to a value if you want to. And what this one's showing you is two different views on the goals. There's segments, and we can get into segments later if we've got time, but a segment would basically tell you overall everyone that visits your site, 8.2%, but you've identified a segment of the population, and it could be done by any attributes or any actions that they do to identify that audience. Whatever audience that they're looking for, 42% was successful. So that's a really good number. Who cares about everybody, because maybe it's a broad audience coming to the internet, but you want the specific ones that are looking for HR benefits, right? So if you know they clicked on benefits from your navigation, they're probably interested in benefits. So let's segment that group and say, these are people looking for benefits information. And what we want to drive them to is the new document that we have on open enrollment. And you can set that path. You can track that path. You say everyone that hits on benefits, we want to track them separately and see if they successfully find the open enrollment documents that we're providing at this time. And it's a good way to gauge how well people are using your site and finding information in a timely manner. So I just talked about sort of segments and views and properties, and what Google Analytics can provide you is a way to slice and dice that raw data into various groups that you can track, because each group's different. An IT member might be different than a sales member accessing your portal. So you can segment those things out. Julia, are we running out of time?
We're almost to the top of the hour. So I think one more minute I think would be good, and we'll get to questions.
Okay. I put too much in the slides, and I apologize, but I get excited about analytics, and there's just a lot that's available.
Right.
So let me quickly get into the property and view so you can sort of see what it's going to take if you decide to go down the Google Analytics path. And basically, Google Analytics from the beginning, we showed you all that stuff that it's collecting. And so as a property, you get a Google Analytics code, and it's going to track all that information. And so what you want to do is make sure you always keep all that information, whether you use it or not. So you'll set up one view that's basically your raw, unfiltered view. And that's just all the information collected. And you don't even do anything with it, but let it collect the information. That way you always have it. And if you decide to create a new view, you can base it off of that unfiltered, and you have all that content. You haven't missed anything just in case you need it. And then it's always a good idea to have a test view. So if you are going to create a new view, you can use your test view to sort of filter, segment, play with the different attributes that you have to see if you're getting the results that you need. So you can do that in your test environment, and then whatever you've tested, if it's working, you can clear it out. But while you're testing, if you test for a month or you test for a couple weeks, it's only going to be collecting in that view the information that you haven't filtered yet. So as you're playing with those things, when you apply those filters, that view will no longer have that data as a historical record. And that's why you keep it in the test environment. So the test environment will always be changing what it's collecting because you're messing with it all the time. You have the unfiltered view that's always collecting all the information if you need it at any time. And then successful filtered views would be the ones that you create that you think you need. So you can show one where it's going to collect all the information, but you're filtering internal traffic. And basically to do that, you isolate URLs. And then maybe you have some goals configured on that one, so it's going to track goals for external users in your Google Analytics. Another view might be specific to a location. So you're going to set a filter at the top that basically only allows data to be collected in Europe. And so for that view, you're only going to see European data. Another view might be that you're just really interested in tablet, you just rolled out a responsive, and you want to see how well it's doing in the tablet environment because you did the use cases and said the most important one for our responsive is tablet. So you can go ahead and do a quick filter on that. Only tablet traffic's going to be collected, and you've got all your reports now based on your tablet usage. So those are different views, all based on that property, which is the Google Analytics code. Here's something new that I thought I would show just really quick. They just came out with this. Typically, Google didn't collect content on users, but what they've done is they are collecting specific information about specific users as visits, right? They always have, but now they sort of segmented it into its own report where they'll give you what sort of data or attributes they know about that client. And it's a little scary because Google actually knows a lot about you. If you use it a lot, they know more about you, and so it can actually start populating some different information about the user itself, who they are, how they came to your site, what device they're using, and then their click paths. So right away out of the report, you're going to have hundreds, thousands of people using your site, so you don't want to just go in there and just start picking and choosing different users. But what you'll see in this report is there's some anomalies. There's some strange users out there that are doing strange things. Or there's patterns that multiple users are doing all the same thing as. And what you can do is just use one of these user reports based on those anomalies or those similarities and say, all right, what are they doing in here? Why is that the case? And so you can use specific examples to sort of give you information about the overall pattern. And here you'll see users coming through, they start in one particular area and work through the site before they leave, and you can follow them and track them. Fragments and other URL information, I'm not going to go over this, we don't have time, but basically if you ever have reports where you see like the home page on multiple rows in Google, so it's www.sharepointhomepage.com, and then there's another row that says www.sharepointhomepage.com/index.html. Well, those two are the same page, but right now they're different rows, and you're not going to get that same information together. So there's some quick things that I have in a slide deck that show you how to bring those things together, how to let Google identify those as the same. And so now we can just have one row for all of the actual ways that people get to the home page. This also happens with fragmentation where if you've got this, if a page loads multiple times, shows different content, but the URL doesn't change, we've got an issue. And or you can look at the report and say, how many pages do I have in my site? Say there's 1,000. How many rows do I have in Google? Say there's 2,000. I've got fragmentation, which means basically you have dynamic content that's being run, and Google doesn't know that it's a different page, or the same page, rather, just displaying different information. And so there's ways that you can show Google how to make that one row. And so you should have this close to the number of pages in your site as you do rows in Google Analytics. And there's a few just settings that you can set to prevent that from happening. And with that, I guess I'm going to end and open it for discussion.
All right, great. There has been some questions coming through. Someone wants to know, is it recommended to add JS to the master page?
I think the best way to implement Google Analytics is to put the code into the master page.
Okay.
That way it's guaranteed to be on all pages.
Right.
The problem with that is access to it if you want to update that code, and maybe you're not the person that has access to the master page to do it. We've implemented it where it actually pulls from a list item into the master page, so you can update the list, and the master page, in essence, is updated. But that's depending on your organization and sort of how much security or permissions they want to grant or refrain from granting.
Okay. My organization does not want to store company data on Google servers. What other tools are available?
Yeah, that happens a lot, and it's funny because we were just talking about Office 365 environment and some of the hang-ups that companies have with putting their content there. Google has some licensing information and information about what data they're collecting and keeping, and when you look through the information, they're collecting information, but they aren't making it specific to you or your users, and they refrain from identifying particular users in general. So the biggest hole for not wanting to use Google probably is in the names that you use for content. Page titles and documents would be the only way that maybe information could be considered insecure. But for the most part, the data itself is secure using Google. But if your company's still not willing to go that route, it's going to cost money, but I recommend Cardiolog by Inlock. They have SharePoint-specific reporting, and I think it has the best interface. The way I like Google because you can slice and dice the information very quickly and easily, and Cardiolog provides an interface that sort of does the same thing. Web Trends On Demand is also another one. Again, that's kind of pricey, but it's specific to SharePoint, and you do collect a lot of information there. So if your company's not willing to go the free route of Google, it will cost some money, and those are two that I recommend.
Okay, great. We did have a question about the recording. Today's recording will be on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ProtivitiSP. And I think that is it for today. Please join us next week where we will be talking about Office 365 Power Apps. Thank you so much for the presentation today, Greg.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, Julie.
And thank you everyone for joining us. We will see you next Thursday. Have a great day.